This is Module 6 on contemporary sociological theories and the environment. Our coverage for this module would be ecological explanation and political economy explanation. For ecological explanation, we'll have Duncan's Point model and Catton's and Dunlap's computing functions of the environment. Under political economy explanation will be societal environmental dialectic and treadmill of production. Environmental sociology has gone through two distinct stages since its emergence in the 1970s as a discrete disciplinary area. The first stage, the major theoretical task was to identify a key factor that created an enduring crisis of environmental degradation and destruction. More recently, there has been a significant shift towards another task to discover the most effective mechanism of environmental reform, which will help chart the way forward to more socially secure and environmentally friendly arrangements. Let us limit and focus our discussion to two foundational explanations for environmental degradation and destruction, which is the coverage of this module. Now, in accounting for the causes of widespread environmental destruction, two primary approaches stand out: the ecological explanation and the political economy explanation. Both approaches view social structure and social change as being reciprocally related to the vast physical environment. But the nature of this relationship is depicted very differently. Let's now discuss the ecological explanation. The ecological explanation for environmental destruction has its roots in the field of human ecology that remained dominant within urban sociology from the 1920s to the 1960s. This urban ecology model was introduced during the 1920s and 1930s by sociologist Robert Park and his colleagues at the University of Chicago, or we call Chicago School. In his discussion of human ecology, Park begins with an explanation of the web of life as the logical prototype of long food chains, each link of which is dependent upon the other. Within the web of life, the active principle is the struggle for existence in which the survivors find their niches in the physical environments and in the division of labor among the different species. Biological ecology was the primary source from which Park borrowed a series of principles which he applied to human populations and communities. In doing so, however, he notes that human ecology differs in several important respects from plant and animal ecology. First, humans are not so immediately dependent upon the physical environment, having been emancipated by the division of labor. You know the division of labor? One does something else while the other does something else, which will benefit each other. So second, technology has allowed humans to remake their habitat and their world rather than to be constrained by it. Third, it is governed by cultural factors, notably an institutional structure rooted in custom and tradition. Human society, then, in contrast to the rest of nature, is organized on two levels, as biotic and cultural. This portrait of nature-society relationship emphasizes humans' exceptional characteristics, such as inventiveness, technical capability, rather than their commonality with other species. It gives priority to the influence of social and cultural factors, such as communication and division of labor, rather than biophysical environmental determinants. Finally, it downplays the constraints imposed by nature by celebrating the capacity or the human capacity to master it. While cultural ecology per se never became dominant, it did force more traditional human ecologists to take greater account of social, organizational, and cultural variables. This was evident in O.D. Duncan's 1961 POIT model, Population, Organization, Environment, Technology, that's POIT, which was depicted as an ecological complex in which each element is interrelated with the other three, and a challenge or a change rather in one can therefore affect each of the others. The point model was a trailblazer in providing insight into the complex nature of ecological disruptions, even if it failed to give sufficient weight to environmental constraints. For example, in this causal sequences, an increase in population can create pressure for technological change. That's how we have mass production of RTWs or ready to wears and food from fish to canned goods. The increased urbanization leads to creation of more pollution with the manufacturing firms and the like. Now, competing functions of the environment, the ecological basis of environmental destruction is probably the best described in Cotton and Dunlap's competing functions of the environment. Cotton and Dunlap's model specifies three general functions the environment serves for human beings: supply depot, living space, and waste repository. Used as a supply depot, the environment is a source of renewable and non-renewable natural resources, air, water, forest, fossil fuels, that are essential for living. Now, overuse of these resources results in shortages or there's scarcities. Now, the living space or habitat provides housing, transportation systems, and other essentials of daily life. Now, overuse of this function results in overcrowding, congestion, and the destruction of habitats for other species. With the waste repository function, the environment serves as a sink for garbage or rubbish, sewage, industrial pollution, and other byproducts. And again, excesses, or the ability of ecosystems to absorb waste results in health problems from toxic waste and an ecosystem disruption. Each of these functions competes for space, often impinging upon the others. For example, placing the garbage landfill in a rural location near to a city both makes that site unsuitable as a living space and destroys the ability of the land to function as a supply depot for food. Similarly, urban sprawl reduces the amount of arable land that can be put into production, while intensive logging threatens the living space of native people in their habitat. Newer problems such as global warming are said to be stemming from the competition among all three functions simultaneously. Now, conflicts between functions at the level of regional ecosystems now have implications for the global environment. There are several very attractive features to Catton and Dunlap's competing functions of environment model. First and foremost, it extends human ecology beyond an exclusive concern with living space, the central focus of urban ecology, to the environmentally related functions of supply and waste disposal. In addition, it incorporates a time dimension. Both the absolute size and the area of overlap of these functions are said to have increased since the year 1900. At the same time, we have this positive. There is also those we consider problem with the model. There is no evidence of human hand here. It says nothing about the social actions involved in these functions and how they are implicated in the overuse and abuse of environmental resources. Above all, there is no provision for changing either values or power relationships. Let us now proceed to the second explanation, the so-called political economy explanation, the societal environmental dialectic, and the treadmill of production. For the societal environmental dialectic, within the environmental sociology, it is Alan Snyberg's book, The Environment from Surplus to Scarcity, 1980, that has probably the most influential explanation of the relationship between capitalism, state, and the environment. Drawing on the strands of both Marxist political economy and neo-Weberian sociology, remember our previous discussion of this classical theorist? Snyberg outlines the nature of genesis of the contradictory relations between economic expansion and environmental disruption. It is common sense, easy to understand how any economic expansion will disrupt the environment, like land conversion from farmlands to a shopping center or a mega mall or adventure parks, which will disrupt the agricultural livelihood of the local residents. And from farming, they may become workers of the mall or may be pushed farther into the mountainous areas. Alan Snyberg has depicted the political economy or the political uh, economy of environmental problems and policies as being organized within the structure of modern industrial society, which he labels the treadmill of production. This refers to the inherent need of an economic system to continually yield a profit by creating consumer demand for new products, even where this means expanding the ecosystem to the point where it exceeds its physical limits to growth or its carrying capacity. We already know what this concept of carrying capacity is. One particular important tool in fueling this demand is advertising, which convinces people to buy new products as much for reasons of lifestyle enhancement as for practical considerations. Mainstream mass media and even the social media platforms are teeming with advertisements. The recently held yet to be concluded Philippine presidential elections, for example, when you open YouTube, and we don't have the premium account, we can't help but watch the politicians' advertisements. Snyberg's portrays the treadmill of production as a complex, self-reinforcing mechanism whereby politicians respond to the environmental fallout created by capital-intensive economic growth by mandating policies that encourage yet further expansion. For example, the resource shortages are handled not by reducing consumption or adopting a more modest lifestyle, but by opening up new areas to exploitation. There is no advertisement to limit your rice intake, for example. Instead, we have meal offers for only rice. That requires production of more rice, except for those health buffs who promotes the keto diet with low carbs by shunning away from rice, flour, and sugar products. The majority of the population in the country are rice eaters. So many are jubilant with only rice offers, which entails importation of rice if we don't have enough rice produced. Snyberg detects a dialectic tension that arises in advanced industrial societies as a consequence of the conflict between the treadmill of production and the demands for environmental protection. He describes this as a clash between use of values. For example, the value of preserving existing unique species of plants and animals, and exchange values which characterize the industrial use of natural resources. As environmental protection has emerged as a significant item on the policy agenda of governments, the state must increasingly balance its dual role as a facilitator of capital accumulation and economic growth, and its role as environmental regulator and champion at the same time. Ends.